Be it game optimizations or driver updates, we're definitely seeing some really great performance out of Cyberpunk 2077 on this new handheld. What's going on, everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new AYA Neo Geek, and this is one I've definitely been excited about. And if you're familiar with these AYA Neo devices, you know that AYA Neo recently released the AYANEO2. Well, actually it started shipping from Indiegogo orders. And we're finally starting to see the AYANEO Geeks. Now, when it comes down to it, this is a lower cost version when you compare it to the AYANEO2, but there are some major differences, and one of the main things here is kind of the overall design and the display itself. They're actually offering these with two different display models. You can pick it up with a 1200p display or an 800p display. I just happen to have the 1200p display here, and we've got very minimal bezels here, but it's not bezel-less like the AYANEO2, and that's really how they kept the cost down on this. But one thing that wasn't held back on this was performance, because it's actually using the same chip. We've got the Ryzen 7 6800U paired up with the Radeon 680M iGPU based on RDNA2, and overall we should see about the same performance between the AYANEO2 and the AYA Neo Geek. Overall, loving the design here. We've got that 7-inch 1200p display. Like I mentioned, they do offer an 800p model, which will come in with obviously a lower resolution. But the overall look and feel should be the same, and I really do like what they've done with this new handheld. Inside of the box, along with the handheld itself, we're going to get some accessories here. We've got our charger, which happens to be a 65 watt fast charger, some different region wall adapters, a USB Type-C cable, and two USB Type-C to full-size USB adapters. This is just going to make it really easy to plug different things into the handheld itself, because all we have here are three USB Type-C ports on this unit. Taking a look at the overall device, starting at the bottom here, we do have dual stereo speakers. It also supports a micro SD card, and we've got a 3.5mm audio jack here for plugging in our headphones. Plus, this USB Type-C port is actually USB 4.0. Moving around top, we've got a fingerprint sensor, volume rocker, two more USB-C ports. One of these is just USB 3.2, the other is another USB 4 port, so we can plug in an eGPU to this device. And obviously, we've got our shoulder buttons and trigger buttons. Now, these are using Hall sensor triggers, so we've got full linear control over them, and these really help out for racing games, especially when it comes to rally racing or drifting. We've got full control over the brake and the gas with these. And one thing I always love seeing on these handhelds is a little bit of RGB around those analog sticks. We've got it on both sides here. It's fully controllable from software. And the analog sticks do utilize Hall sensors. In fact, these are using the big Hall sensor joysticks. So it's just like a real full-size controller here. We don't have to worry about any kind of dead zones or drift down the road with this Hall sensor technology. D-pad actually feels really great. Some of my favorite D-pads on the market have been from AYA. And on the AYA Neo 2, one of the best D-pads that I've ever tested. So we'll have to take a look at this one also, but I got a feeling it's going to work out just as well. Over here on the right hand side, obviously A, B, X, Y. We've also got a home button right underneath that dedicated AYA button, and all of these can be remapped from software, but when it comes to this AYA button, it's going to bring up AYA space at any time, and from there we can control the brightness, volume, TDP, fan control. Everything we need to control the functions of this handheld is built into AYA space. And finally, taking a look around back, we've got a lot of ventilation here for that built-in cooling system, but we've also got a little more going on, and that's really the ergonomics of the whole handheld itself. This thing is actually really comfortable to hang on to. They've specifically designed the rear palm rest here to be very comfortable while doing long playthroughs. And it's not just the rear palm rest that make it really comfortable, it's actually the whole design of the handheld itself. From the side swoops over here, they actually refer to it as the baby sleeping position, the way it's shaped. When it comes to the specs of the AYA Neo Geek, for the CPU, we've got that Ryzen 7 6800U. This is based on Zen 3 Plus. We've got 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 2.7 GHz, and a boost up to 4.7. Like I mentioned, this is using the same chip as the AYANEO2, so performance between the two should be basically the same. The GPU is the Radeon 680M. It's based on RDNA2. We've got 12 compute units, and it'll run up to 2200 MHz. You can get the AYA Neo Geek with either 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM, but both of them are going to be using LPDDR5 running at 6400 MHz. I have the 32 gigabyte version here. It uses a PCIe 3.0 M.2 2280 SSD, and it will support a double-sided SSD, so we don't have to worry about, sourcing out a large single-sided SSD. We've got plenty of room in here. It's got a 7-inch 1200p IPS display, 400 nits of brightness, 323 pixels per inch, 135% sRGB, and I've had a lot of questions about this. Basically, when you go over 100%, it's a little more saturated, and personally, I love a little more saturation. I think it looks great here. We've also got a color temperature of 6600K, so we've got a really nice cool tone to it. A 50.25 watt-hour battery with 65 watt quick charging capabilities, and battery life is really going to depend on how hard you want to push the device. We can run this at a bunch of different TDPs on this APU here, and we can net anywhere from, an hour of gameplay up to 4.5 hours of gameplay. Really depends on how hard you're going to push it. We've got Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2, and right out of the box, this is running Windows 11, but you could always install Linux, and they do have AYA OS on the way. Hopefully, I can get my hands on it soon. There's some internal testing going right now. It would be really nice to show it off, but in the future, I do plan on installing SteamOS 3 on this, so definitely keep an eye on the channel. And real quick, I wanted to go over this in case you were thinking about picking up the 800p version of the AYA Neo Geek just to keep the cost down a little more. It also has a 7-inch display, but we've got a lower resolution coming in at 1280 by 800. Pixel density will be a little less also, coming in at 219 pixels per inch. It's got a bit more brightness coming in at 500 nits, but sRGB is only at 95%. I was really eager to jump into a little bit of gameplay, so here's Forza Horizon 5, and I can show off these triggers here. Now, my favorite genre of game is racing. It could be arcade, simulation. Having those analog triggers or linear triggers is a must in my opinion. Just gives us really nice control over that throttle and brake at any given time. And by the way, we're at 15 watts on the TDP, 800p medium settings. We can get an average of around 70 FPS, but I do like pushing these handhelds a little more. So I've just taken the TDP up to 27 watts. We're now at 1200p medium settings. No fidelity CAS, no FSR, and we can get an average of around 68 to 69 FPS out of this game, like it is right now. With fidelity CAS or FSR, you're going to get much higher out of it. In fact, with FSR set to balanced 720p medium settings, we can average around 90 FPS out of this game. So like I mentioned, very comfortable handheld to play for an extended period of time. It kind of just sinks right into your palm here. Now, obviously, we're running Windows. We've got a touch screen here, but one of the main features with these AYA devices is AYA Space. We've got a dedicated button over here. Pressing it once is going to bring up our mini overlay. We can change the brightness, we can change the volume, we can choose from a few different fan profiles and even GPU clock profiles, but one of the main features is TDP control. So while in game, all we need to do to change that TDP is open up AYA Space. We've got 3 presets, and we've also got kind of a custom preset here, so a total of 4. Power saving is 11 watts, balance is going to be 15, game is 22, and Pro mode is fully adjustable, so we can actually go down to 5 watts and up to 33. 33 is pushing it a bit for that battery. I mean, the cooling system will definitely handle it, and it opens up this 6800U, but with Pro mode, I have it set around 30 watts, but most of the time I'm in game mode. When we long press on the AYA button, it's going to bring us directly into AYA Space. And from here, we've got a game launcher, which will download metadata and artwork. It kind of scans through all of the regular directories and finds what games we have. We can start our games up directly from here, and it comes in really handy, so we don't even have to get into another front end. But going up to Assistant is where we can get down to the nitty gritty. And AYA recently released a few new apps. We've got Fan Tech, and this will allow us to control the fan. We can go from, 1% all the way up to 100%. But the one I really like is their new Smart Fan Mini app. So this will give us a curve, and we can fully customize this curve. We can set up a few different profiles, and you can set this exactly how you want it. If you want this thing to be a bit louder but stay a bit cooler, you can do it from here. Or you can rely on the presets that are already here. And to tell you the truth, I haven't had much trouble with the presets they have. We've also got a full control suite for the handheld itself. From here, we can customize the buttons, we can customize the analog sticks, we can recalibrate the analog sticks. We've also got vibration intensity control. We can go from low to high. I usually have it set around medium. We can recalibrate the buttons and joysticks, and there's full instructions here on how to do it. There's kind of a key combination we need to get into calibration mode. I personally haven't had to do it with any of the handhelds I have yet. Burst mode. This is actually a really cool feature for the Geek. Basically, it's a single button macro setup. We can set up a multi-key command per button if you want to, and that way you could set up special moves for just a single key. And of course, we've got RGB control for the RGB around those analog sticks. There's a few presets that we have here. We've got a breathe RGB loop, Give it a second to initialize, and it'll just breathe through the RGB on the analog sticks here. And having these presets is great, but I really just like having a static color on each of the analog sticks. You can kind of swap it out to any color you want on each of them, kind of make it your own. I think it looks really good in the black with that blue and purple. I think it kind of sets it off. So yeah, AYA Space has a lot of customization and a lot of tweaking that we can do with our AYA Neo devices, and it's come a long way since the first iteration. They're always adding new features here for different handhelds, and in fact, the fan mini app that we took a look at was just added a couple days ago. Time to jump back into some gaming, and here we have Mortal Kombat 11, medium settings, 1200p. This is a very well optimized game. I know it's been out for a while, but it's still super fun to play, and it works very well on these APUs. Even the 5000 series at low settings can net you some pretty decent performance. But on the AYA Neo Geek in game mode, we're at 1200p medium, running at a constant 60. Next up, Spiderman Miles Morales, and if you've ever tried this on an APU, you know how hard it can be to run. It's just kind of all over the place with these integrated graphics, and in game mode, at around 21 to 22 watts, 800p low settings, we can get over 60 on average. Now we still get a few dips under 60, and hopefully in the future we get a few more optimizations specifically for this game, but it does run quite well. Next thing I wanted to do is test out this D-pad. So we've got Street Fighter V 1200p medium settings. Love the feel of this. It feels just like the one in the AYA Neo 2, which I mentioned earlier is my favorite D-pad I've ever used on one of these handhelds. So we've basically got the same thing here. Great feedback, it's got a nice roll to it, and I use this mainly for fighting games, but when it comes to like platformers, you're going to be good to go with this D-pad. It's very accurate. Next on the list, we've got Dirt 5 800p with a medium-low mix. We can average 63 FPS out of this game, and it's definitely looking a lot better than it did a few months ago, even on the 6800U. And I think a lot of this has to do with newer driver updates from AMD, but either way you look at it, we're getting some great performance out of this game. And of course, we had to throw Cyberpunk 2077 in the mix. 800p Steam Deck preset FSR set to performance. We can get an average of 66 FPS out of the 6800U. And remember, we're in game mode right now with the TDP, so we're right there at 23 watts. If you take that up, it's going to net you a lot better performance with Cyberpunk 2077. I also wanted to test out Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and we're using recommended settings. This game's actually really awesome about kind of getting the settings correct for you, but you could always go in and tweak it. We've got a lot of stuff that we can mess with. We're still in game mode, and we averaged 92 FPS, but if you take a look at that low, it's sitting at 24, so there is some tweaking that I need to do with this game. Now, I did test single player just to see how it performed, and I locked it at 60, really good experience, but I always like running this benchmark because there's just kind of a lot more that goes on in it. Since the AYA Neo Geek has USB 4, I also wanted to do a quick eGPU test, but I do plan on making a full eGPU video with this because I've got some interesting findings here. Now usually when I run an eGPU, I'm going to run it on an external monitor using either HDMI or DisplayPort from the video card we're using, but I did want to show you that it works on the internal screen also. It's going to cut down on the performance by quite a bit. And that's the main reason I always like connecting directly to the GPU with an external monitor. But even on the internal display here with that RTX 3060, God of War 1200p Ultra settings, we can net an average of around 78 FPS. So external GPUs are also working with the AYA Neo Geek. Now, I've had a lot of time to spend with the AYA Neo 2, the white one on the bottom, and the big main difference that you're going to see right off the bat is the bezel-less display. Now with the AYA Neo Geek that I have, we've got the 1200p display, so they are very comparable, except the fact that we've got some bezels here. Another key difference would be the handles, or where your palm rests go. Round handles on the AYA Neo 2, we've got the Geek handle design on the AYA Neo Geek. The 2 supports a PCIe 4.0 M.2 SSD, the Geek only supports 3.0, and the 2 also has a much better haptic system built in. It's actually got the same HD rumble motors that the Nintendo Switch has, so it does feel a little better, if you're talking about haptics, but really, when it comes down to it, performance is going to be exactly the same between the both of these devices. So, if you did end up getting the Geek and you were worried about missing out with the AYA Neo 2, just note that you're going to get the same performance that the 2 is putting out. I will tell you that I do like the feel of the Geek over the AYA Neo 2. I just like the ergonomics here. It does feel a lot more comfortable to hang on to for long periods of time. But that bezel-less display on the 2 does look really good. And these aren't too noticeable given that we have a whole black design, but side by side, you can really tell the difference. But that's going to wrap it up for my first look at the AYA Neo Geek. I've got a lot more testing than I want to do with this, and I've got a few more videos planned. We're definitely going to do a full emulation showcase video. That'll be coming soon. I also want to get some eGPU testing out of the way, and if there's anything else you want to see running on the AYA Neo Geek, let me know in the comments below. One thing I've been really thinking about was just installing SteamOS 3 or Steam Deck OS on this. So yeah, I mean, if that's something you want to see, let me know. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you're interested in learning more about the AYA Neo Geek or even the AYA Neo 2, I'll leave some links in the description. And if you enjoy watching videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and think about turning notifications on so you know when I post the next one. But like always, thanks for watching.